everybody. I want to welcome everybody we're in Coleman, Alabama for everybody that's online, and we're here to do our third annual MS Symposium here at Coleman. All right, my name is Stuart Schlossman. I'm president and founder of MS Views and News. I too have MS. You all know the story already. Today's program, I would like to thank Sandoz and Novartis for sponsoring us to do this event today, and I hope that you all can give them a round of applause and say thank you as well. All right, so we have Frances Andrada, again, she's from the FDA, and she's going to be speaking with you for, again, 15 minutes. Can we get started?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Commander Frances Andrada. I'm a nurse practitioner by training. I'm a clinical reviewer at the Food and Drug Administration. Thank you for having me here today. I was looking at the agenda, and this is definitely a great program in store for you all. I appreciate and I'm honored to be here to have the opportunity to talk to you all about biosimilars and what you all as patients should know. Let's jump right in. Next slide. I'll go into more detail, but I want to sort of set the stage a bit about the conditions that approved biosimilars treat. These types of biologic medications are safe and effective treatment for chronic and severe conditions that you see here, which include multiple sclerosis, chronic bowel disease like Crohn's disease, kidney conditions, macular degeneration, arthritis, some cancers, and also supportive care for cancer treatment, diabetes, insulin is a biologic medication, chronic skin diseases, psoriasis, and osteoporosis. Next slide. So what are biologic medications? I previously mentioned that biosimilars are a type of biologic, but before we talk more in depth about biosimilars, it's helpful to understand more about biologics in general. Most biologics are made from living sources, such as animal cells or microorganisms like bacteria or yeast. Because biologics generally come from natural living sources, biologic medications are usually more complex in structure than other drugs, and they are more complicated to make. Biologics are also much larger molecules. Aspirin is an example of a drug made from chemicals that is easy to copy. It is not a biologic. But here on the slide is a picture comparing the size of different biologics to aspirin, which is a chemical compound. Aspirin is a small structure on the rightmost of the picture with the arrow pointed to it. As you can see from the aspirin comparison, biologics, which are large in size compared to aspirin, range in size from insulin, which is relatively small, as you see here on the left, to a much larger monoclonal antibody, which is the larger Y-shaped structure shown in the figure. Next slide. This slide outlines the key statutory definitions in the law that governs biosimilars. A reference product is the single biological product already approved by the FDA against which a proposed biosimilar product is compared. A biosimilar product is one that meets two key standards. It must be one, highly similar to, and two, have no clinically meaningful differences from an existing FDA-approved reference product. An interchangeable biosimilar is a biosimilar product that is expected to produce the same clinical result as the reference product in any given patient, and the switching between this product and the reference product does not increase safety risks or decrease effectiveness. Interchangeability is mostly relevant for pharmacy substitution, and I'll go into this a bit more later. Next slide. So let's break down that last slide a little bit more. A biosimilar medication is an FDA-approved biologic medication that is very similar to a reference product or original biologic medication. Biosimilars have no clinically meaningful differences from the original biologic. This means you can expect the same safety and effectiveness from the biosimilar over the course of treatment as you would the reference product. Biosimilars are made from the same types of sources, such as living cells or microorganisms, as safe and effective as their original product. They provide the same treatment benefits, are given the same strength and dosage, and are not expected to cause new or worsening side effects. Next slide. This slide shows a very high-level overview of the general data requirements that the FDA reviews to determine whether a medication is biosimilar to the reference product. For approval, the structure and function of an approved biosimilar were compared to a reference product and looked at key characteristics such as purity to ensure that the product doesn't have any impurities like unwanted residual chemicals, molecular structure, and bioactivity to ensure that the medication works as intended. The data from these comparisons must show that the biosimilar is highly similar to the reference product. Additionally, a biosimilar has no clinically meaningful differences from a reference product. This means that studies were performed to show that there are no meaningful differences in terms of safety, purity, and potency in comparison to the reference product. In other words, any differences observed are not large enough to have an impact on patient care or outcomes. FDA looks at clinical data such as pharmacokinetic studies, which shows how a medication is absorbed, distributed, and metabolized by the body to make sure it happens the same way it does in the original product. There's also an immunogenicity assessment, which is an evaluation of the risk of an immune response to the biosimilar. And if needed, additional clinical studies will be done to support the biosimilar safety. Next slide. So why aren't biosimilars identical to the original biologics? Because most biologics are made from living sources, it is normal for both biosimilars and the reference product to have minor differences between batches of the same medications. Cells can make exact copies of a protein, but other add-ons and changes may occur, which result in different versions or natural variations of the molecule. So as a result, there are millions of slightly different versions of the same protein or antibody per dose or batch. One way to think about it is like a recipe for making bread. All biologic medications, including biosimilars, are similar to loaves of bread if they were made with the same recipe that includes yeast, which is the living source. No one loaf of bread is an exact copy of another, but they all are the same type of bread. This is true for biologics. Each batch of a biologic medication is made with a mix of ingredients that include living sources. Because living sources have slight variations, each batch is not an exact copy, but each batch produces the same treatment benefits. Should you be worried that biosimilars aren't identical to the reference product? Short answer is no. Because most biologics are made from living sources, it is normal for both biosimilars and reference products to have minor differences between batches of the same medication. That is why they are called biosimilars and why they aren't identical to the original biologic. The reference biologic has the same normal and expected variations, and biosimilars match these variations. The biosimilar approval process is extremely rigorous, and as part of that process, FDA carefully reviews the differences between them to ensure that the biosimilars are just as safe and effective as the reference product, and they will provide the same treatment benefits and risks as the reference biologic it was compared to. Next slide. One question we're frequently asked is whether biosimilars are the same as generics. There are a lot of similarities between biosimilars and generics. There's slightly different data expectations, but the concepts are very similar between the two. Biosimilars are like generics in some ways in that both types of medications are compared to an original or brand product for approval. So they are both versions of previously FDA-approved medications, and they may offer more affordable treatment options to patients. The reason why one is a biosimilar and one is a generic is because they are approved through different regulatory approval pathways. But they both avoid duplicating certain costly clinical trials. Both biosimilars and generics go through a rigorous process, but there are differences between biosimilars and generics. In addition, biosimilars and the original biologic are generally made from natural and living ingredients, whereas generics and the brand are made from chemical ingredients. Chemical ingredients can be more easily copied, whereas natural and living sources cannot be copied exactly. So the information needed to demonstrate that a biologic is biosimilar to another biologic can be much more extensive than what is needed for a generic to prove that they are a copy of a brand. Next slide. So what are interchangeable biosimilars? I want to go over some information about interchangeable biosimilars because there's a lot of confusion about interchangeable biosimilars versus biosimilars. An interchangeable biosimilar is a biosimilar that may be substituted without consulting your prescriber because it meets additional requirements related to the potential for automatic substitution at the level of the pharmacy. So this is subject to state laws. This works similarly to how you get generics at the pharmacy, when you get your prescription from your provider, you go to fill it at the pharmacy, and the pharmacist can give you either an original biologic or an interchangeable biosimilar, excuse me. But not all biosimilars are interchangeable. Companies must request approval as an interchangeable biosimilar specifically. Next slide. So what is the difference between a biosimilar and an interchangeable biosimilar? Scientifically and clinically, nothing is different. Biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars both must meet FDA's requirements for showing that they are highly similar to and have no clinically meaningful differences from a biologic already approved by the FDA. The law that governs biosimilars states that if a biosimilar is automatically substituted at the pharmacy, it has to be determined to be an interchangeable biosimilar. Therefore, an interchangeable biosimilar meets additional requirements related to the potential for pharmacy-level substitution. There are many reasons why a company may not seek interchangeable status, such as business reasons, or because the medication itself is administered at a hospital or an outpatient clinic, and you won't get it at your local pharmacy. If you're wondering if you should wait for a biosimilar to be approved as an interchangeable in order to use it, you shouldn't. Both biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars meet the same high standard of biosimilarity for FDA approval, and both are as safe and effective as the original biologic. Biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars can both be used in place of the original biologic. Next slide. I want to emphasize some key points about reference, biosimilar, and interchangeable products. Patients and providers can be confident in the safety and effectiveness of all biosimilars, regardless if they have been approved as an interchangeable. They can all be prescribed in place of the reference product. They can be used in patients who are treatment experienced and treatment naive, meaning if you have or have not had the reference product. FDA reviews a lot of information to decide whether a biosimilar meets high FDA approval standards and to ensure that biosimilars are safe and effective treatment options. This includes ensuring that manufacturers show that there are no differences in side effects, including that the side effects of the biosimilar are not more frequent or more severe than those of the original biologic. Biosimilars also undergo the same robust quality assessments as their original biologic. Next slide. So why would a patient or healthcare provider switch to a biosimilar? For one, biologic medications are very expensive, and if the patient, provider, or formulary management programs are concerned about costs, they can consider switching to a biosimilar. A patient may also be switched to a biosimilar due to their health insurance coverage. In addition, interchangeable biosimilars can be substituted by the pharmacist for the reference product. Biosimilars that are not interchangeable have to be prescribed by your provider. Next slide. So will biosimilars save you money? We know that biologics are often very expensive and can be unaffordable, especially for people using several medications. The goal of biosimilars is to offer more access to treatment at a lower cost. Biosimilars are approved by relying on the FDA's findings that the original biologic is safe and effective, and as previously discussed, that they don't have to duplicate certain clinical trials that are extremely costly. So the biosimilars theoretically cost less to make. The hope is that the lower costs will save patients money and the biosimilars will be covered by more insurance companies. However, FDA doesn't have any input into the cost of the drugs and coverage, and reimbursement can depend on many factors, such as your insurance plans, formulary coverage. If you have insurance, check with your insurance provider to see what's included in your plan. If you're covered by Medicare and Medicaid, check with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid and your plan provider. Next slide. I encourage you all to talk to your healthcare provider if you have additional questions. It's also important to make sure you're checking trusted sources. Biosimilars are a growing field of critical treatment options for a range of conditions. FDA is committed to educating patients and caregivers about biosimilars so they understand all potential treatment options. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly review the resources FDA has available about biologics, including biosimilar and interchangeable biosimilars. Developing education is important to the work that we do at the FDA in order to support and improve the understanding of biosimilars. On the next slide, you'll see a snapshot of the patient materials available, including fact sheets, infographics, and articles and patient-focused videos about biosimilars. For those of you that want to look more into what we've talked about today, I recommend checking out this link. The QR code there will also take you to the same site. We're also looking for any feedback, so if after reviewing these resources you have additional feedback, please let us know. We're looking to improve. Next slide. This slide just shows a snapshot of the materials available for healthcare providers, including fact sheets and a list of free continuing medical education courses we worked on with Medscape. There's also videos and infographics for providers there. Next slide. We've also developed a biosimilar curriculum toolkit, which is one of our most comprehensive resources designed to help educate students in healthcare professional degree programs, medicine, nursing, PAs, pharmacy. This toolkit provides faculty and other interested stakeholders with a variety of educational resources to help them understand and apply and teach concepts related to biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars, along with information about the corresponding regulatory approval pathway in the United States. Next slide. Increasing accessibility is important to us. We also have many patient and provider materials available in other languages listed here, including Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, French, and Arabic. Next slide. So the Purple Book, it's a database that provides the public with an online search engine with information about FDA licensed biological products. This includes reference, biosimilar, and interchangeable products. It has many features to meet the needs of the users that access it. You can do as many searches as you like, look at labels. There's a user guide available that also has more descriptions when you're trying to learn how to navigate it. Next slide. So this slide is a list of all the various resources we discussed, plus a link to some of our guidances and drugs at FDA if you want to take a deeper dive into information about biosimilars. And then last slide. Thank you all very much for your time. Please feel free to share these materials with anyone who may be interested. These slides should be available to you so you can click around and explore. And as stated earlier in the presentation, stakeholder outreach is a very important part of the work that we do. So we'd be happy to connect if there are additional opportunities for us to provide education. Like I mentioned, we're also open to any feedback and educational materials. So don't hesitate to reach any or to provide any. Thank you.
What is the cost? Can you tell us what the cost might be on biosimilars versus brands?
So I unfortunately don't know the exact cost, but we do know that because the development of biosimilars, there's a shortened pathway and it uses less resources, we anticipate it being much less than the original biologic. I think in terms of multiple sclerosis, there's currently right now only one approved biosimilar for the treatment of MS, and it's Tyruko, which is a biosimilar to Tysabri. I imagine as exclusivity of other reference biologics expire, that you will see more biosimilars for MS medications available.
Okay, thank you. One moment, please.
Yes, I am interested in Grease. I know that they were supposed to release a generic earlier this year, but yet still nothing. I didn't know if you had any information on that, if there was a biosimilar or the Grease.
So I can't comment on any pending or future applications of future approvals of medications, but I'm sure that when it is released, there will be the company will be sure to make sure that it is widely available.
Okay, she says, thank you very much. And does anybody else have a question? If not, Francis, thank you very much for joining us online today. And we greatly appreciate people from the FDA helping us out. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Take care.
All right, so we're wrapping this up. Again, thank you everybody for coming. We cannot do these programs without you. And so thank you. Thank you.